I go out on job sites, construction job sites, and talk directly to the workers and share his story. This past May, I was on a job site in Boston, and after it was done, one of the construction workers was walking me back to my car, and it was fall stand-down week, and he said to me, you know what? He said, I've been in this business for 20 years, and he said, you're the first fall stand-down presentation I actually listened to. And that's scary. That is scary.
Hey everyone, welcome to Beyond the Build, the podcast where innovation meets collaboration in the world of construction. We bring together thought leaders and industry experts to explore the cutting-edge ideas transforming construction equipment, supply chains, building materials, and workforce productivity.
This podcast is proudly brought to you by Faro, the revolutionary last-mile logistics platform, redefining how high-value, time-sensitive construction deliveries get done. Need it fast? Need it right? Faro.
Hey everyone, today we're joined by Rena Harrington, a passionate workplace safety advocate and president at United Support and Memorial for Workplace Fatalities. After the tragic loss of her son in a construction incident, Rena has dedicated herself to prevent workplace fatalities and promote safety leadership where safety is critical. Today we'll discuss workplace safety, the strategies Rena promotes to prevent fatalities, and how organizations can improve safety compliance while fostering a culture of awareness and accountability. Rena, welcome to Beyond the Build.
Thank you.
Where are you at today? Are you based East Coast?
Well, I'm East Coast. I'm about 25 miles north of Boston.
Okay, got it. Perfect. So it's what, 12 o'clock? No, 1 o'clock.
It's 1 o'clock here.
Okay, perfect. Well, reading up on what you do, like this, I believe is probably one of the most important podcasts that I think we'll do. Because for me, it's not about business. It's not about money. This is about people. And this is what's truly important, and then reading about you and your story and what you had to go through, with your son, Justin. I mean, it's just, I can only relate into the point where we lost a child, my wife and I, but it was miscarriage and it was a home birth kind of the whole thing. But even when we went through the grief, I told people I attacked it. I tried to listen to songs and weep, but there was no way that I could, even losing a child, tell somebody, I feel exactly what you feel.
It's nothing I would wish on my worst enemy.
It's not. And I mean, I think in this age where everybody's about division and what I want, what my opinions are, it's like, can we just stop for a second and realize that we're all human? We're all going through something. And it's like, how do we come together to just support each other to get through these, circumstances? So that's what I'm all about. But I wanted to just preface to this is like, this is unscripted. And I do believe this is so important. And there's so many different ways we can go with this conversation between you and I today. But I kind of want to let you lead a little bit in terms of, at the end of the day, when our listeners turn into this podcast, whether it's construction rental companies, whether it's contractors, whether it's, equipment manufacturers or building supplies, people that are involved in this industry, like, what do we want them to say? Wow, I'm so glad I took 45 minutes of my life to listen to this conversation because you know what? I felt it and I'm going to go make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what that's what my organization is all about. I mean, United Support and Memorial for Workplace Fatalities, and what the biggest thing that we encourage our family members to do is to share their stories, because that is what is going to make the impact. It's not going to be a PowerPoint from OSHA on fall stand down. It's not going to be a bunch of statistics being thrown at people. It's the stories that you hear is what people are going to take away from it. And in my situation, what happened to me was, do you want me to go into what happened to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I'm here to listen.
So back in 2018, my son, Justin, he was 27 years old, and he was killed on January 18th, 2018, He was a construction worker, and he worked for a very small family-owned construction company. It was only the owner and we had a few young men, that would help him out. And they were working on a private home up in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and he was there early in the morning. The homeowner, it was a private home, so the homeowner originally was a vacation home, and the homeowner wanted to turn it into a year-round home, so they needed to dig out a basement to put a heating system in. And so they raised the house up on cribbing and I-beams, and he was digging in a corner of the basement that morning, and he was on a compact backhoe, and this particular machine had no cab, no roll bar, and no kill switch on it, and the controls were
Oh,
right in front of him. Yep,
yeah, it's an open.
and
Yeah, we call that an open ROPS, where there's
yep.
no canopy. It's just, but yep. Mm-hmm.
Right, and, so what they think happened, OSHA did an investigation, and what they think happened was that, um, the claw attachment to the backhoe caught on some rock bedding, and it propelled him up, and his neck and his back came in contact with the I-beam holding up the house, and at the same time, his chest went over the controls, and he was unable to extricate himself, and so he was crushed between the machine itself and the I-beam. The pressure was so great on the machine that, the hydraulic line split, and he was covered in hydraulic fluid, and that's actually how his boss found him, was by following the trail of hydraulic fluid. And then, of course, frantically tried to extricate him, and in the process of trying to do that, he himself had a heart attack and had to be taken to the hospital. So I was at work that day, and I worked in an office setting at the time, and it was about they estimated that this happened between, like, 8:30 and 9:30 in the morning, and it was when I was in the office, it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was just coming out of a meeting and heading back to my office, and I got paged overhead that I had a phone call, and at the time, my office sat behind the receptionist area, and when I came around the corner, she poked her head out to me, and she said, "Rena, it's the Danvers police," and I lived in Danvers at the time. And so I went in my office and I took the call. He identified himself as a police officer and he asked me some questions. And then he asked me if I had a son named Justin. And I said, "Yes, why? What's going on? What's this all about?" And he said, "I'm going to give you a number and I want you to call this number and ask for this detective. And the detective is going to have a lot more information for you." So he gave me the number and I called it and hit the detective's 3-digit extension and he didn't pick up and I just felt weird and I hung up. And so I walked over to my supervisor's office across the hall and I said, "Something's not right. Something's weird." And I told her what was going on and she said, "Do you want to call again? Do you want me to come with you?" And I said, "Yes, sure." And so we went back in my office week, and she said to me, "When you call this time, don't hit his extension, hit 0 so you get the dispatcher." So I hit 0 and I got the dispatcher. This was to the Gloucester police, a different town. And told him who I was, and I said, "I got a phone call from the Danvers police asking me to call you, something to do with my son, Justin. What is going on with my son?" And he said, "No one came to see you from the Danvers police?" I said, "No." I said, "What is going on?" And he said, "Let me see if I can find the detective," and he puts me on hold. And then he comes back a few seconds later and he said, "The detective's not here. Can you call back?" I said, "No, I'm not calling back. You need to tell me what's going on. No one is telling me anything." And then he said, "Is there anybody with you?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "My supervisor's sitting right here." And then he said, "I'm very sorry to have to tell you this over the phone, but your son was in an accident at work and he's passed away." And I just looked at my supervisor and I said, "He passed away." And she got up and she left the room and I can hear the police officer. He's still talking to me, but I have no clue what he's saying to me because my head is exploding. And then all of a sudden there's like 5 people into my office and someone takes the phone from my hand. And the last thing I remember, hearing him say was that he had been taken to the medical examiner's office in Boston. And then people were in asking questions, and there was a lot of chatter, and I don't remember much of anything of that. But then all of a sudden, I remembered my daughter works with me in the same company in a different department, and I said, "Oh my gosh, someone's got to go get Laura." And then she came around the corner, and she was 21 years old at the time. And she looked at me and saw everybody in my office and said, "Mom, what's wrong?" And I had to tell her in front of all these people that her brother passed away. And she said, "How? Why?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't have any information at the time. Or I didn't have any information." And so I said, "We have to go tell your dad." I'm divorced from their dad. So we got in a car, we headed up to his work. And about 5 minutes into the ride, her phone rings, my daughter's phone rings, and it's one of her uncles to say, "We have your dad. We're heading back up to Gloucester." And so, all right, we turned around, we had to back up the highway. And while we were driving, all of a sudden, Laura says to me, "Oh my God, Mom, it's on Facebook." And there was a news media helicopter shot of the house. And it just said construction worker killed. It didn't say his name, but the problem was people were sharing it. Okay. And Gloucester is a very small,
Yeah, I was gonna say
short,
it's probably
massive,
really tight-knit community, so everybody
tight-knit
knows
community.
probably the house he's working on.
Right, and we're gonna recognize this, and so we had to scramble and start calling people in the car to tell them so that they wouldn't. And Laura actually posted on that post, that news media post, in all capital letters, she wrote, "Please stop sharing until all family members can be notified." I mean, that's the one thing that's the problem with the news media. They don't care about
They don't.
that
It's
when
like
there's
I got my heart ripped out of my chest. I feel like I'm paralyzed. I can't do anything, and all you people are doing is continue to just send flashing signals out. Like,
yeah,
just stop for a
it's
second.
awful.
Go
Yeah,
post your food. Go
yeah,
post what you're eating. And stop.
right.
Yeah.
Yep,
Oh my
and
gosh.
then we get to my dad's house, and my dad, God bless him, he's 82 years old, and he's a police scanner junkie. He listens to police scanner all day long. And I got in the house, and I went over to him, and I just took his hand, and I said, "Dad," I said, "I got a call from the police a little while ago." I said, "There's been an accident." I said, "It's Justin." And I said, "He's passed away from an accident at work." And he immediately burst into tears, and then he said, "Oh my gosh." He said, "I was listening to the whole exchange between both of those police departments all morning long." He said, "They were trying to find you," meaning me. And, uh, and the kicker about that is people are very upset at how I was told, because I was told over the phone that it should have been an in-person meeting. And what people are really, really upset about is that the Danvers Police Department is located directly across the street from my employer at the time. They could have walked over, and they didn't. And, so my, people started to arrive at the house and everything, and then my husband at the time, my second husband, he came, and I said, "Will you take me to the police station?" And so we went to the police station, and the detective came out, and he said, "I'm so very sorry for your loss." And he handed me Justin's wallet and his car keys and his cell phone. And that's kind of when it really started to get real for me. And because I've been in shock since that phone call. And so I said to him, I said, "What happened?" And he said, "Well," he said, "there's going to be an investigation. OSHA's been called. They're going to be getting in touch with you." He said, "But right now it looks like a freak accident." And then he proceeded to tell me how my baby died. And as a mother, when you have something this catastrophic happen to one of your children, your brain will go to a place to protect you, to protect your soul. And my brain immediately went to the fact that it was instant. He was here one minute, he was gone the next. He didn't feel any pain. It was instant. And I held on to that for almost a year. And then I read the OSHA report, I read the medical examiner's report, I read the state police report and the local police reports, and there was a face report, face program report done on him as well. And, I know now that it wasn't instant and that it did take a few minutes and that he may have known what was happening to him at the time. And I have to live with that as a mother. It's, and it doesn't matter. It's irrational. It doesn't matter. And even 8 years later, I have this guilt that I didn't protect him. And that's what you do as a mother. You protect your children. And I didn't do that. And so, and I know it sounds irrational, but it just is. It doesn't matter how old your child is. You're gonna, as a mother, you're gonna feel this way. So, but over 700 people came to his wake and his funeral. I mean, the outpouring of support from the community was just astounding. It was unbelievable. And I felt like I had to make sure that these people knew that how much we appreciated this. So I took out a full-page ad in the Gloucester Times to thank the whole community from our families and for the support and everything. It was just amazing. And it was about 3 months after he passed away, I got a letter from my OSHA area director. And we'd already had the conversation about the investigation and how long it was going to take and blah, 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 and all that. We'd already had that conversation. So when I opened the letter, I was kind of shocked to read. He was telling me about, April 28th being Worker Memorial Day. And the Mass Kosh was going to be they put on a ceremony on the steps of the State House in Boston. And all I saw was the words Worker Memorial. And oh my God. And I just took it and I threw it in the trash. I was like, nope, 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 nope. I don't want anything to do with that. And I forgot about it. And then the following year, I got another letter from him, same time frame, in late March. And this time it sat on my kitchen table for about a week. I'd walk over to it and I'd read a little bit and then I'd go, okay, that's enough. And I got through it, but I still couldn't wrap my brain really around what was Worker Memorial, what that meant. And I didn't have the energy to do the research on it. I just didn't. I did not have the energy. And so that one ended up in the trash. And then the end of that year, 2019, I happened to be looking on my laptop and I was reading an article about another worker that was killed on the job. And at the end of the article, it said, submitted by Tanya Ford, Executive Director, Vice President, United Support Memorial for Workplace Fatalities. And I was like, whoa, what is this? Because I'd done grief groups with other parents who've lost children, but no one, the majority of them were overdoses, or car accidents. And this felt to me like this was kind of unique, and when you feel like everybody does this every day, you get up and you go to work and then you come home. I mean, that's what everybody does every day. And when you don't come home, that's huge. And so this was a community of family members. I clicked on it, went on the website. It was a community of family members of fallen victims, workplace fatality victims. And collectively, they share their stories because once you tell your story to someone, that someone tells another person who tells another person, and the chain begins. And all you need is one person from that chain to take that story to their place of employment and say, hey, I heard a story about a fatality. We're doing a similar project. Let's see how much safer we can make this project. And I also learned through this organization that we don't call them accidents, they're incidents, okay? Because workplace fatalities, every single one of them is preventable. Every single one. It's not an accident. Okay, because the reason these things happen is unsafe practices, lack of safety training, and employers trying to cut corners to save money. Okay, now that type of machine is actually illegal in Massachusetts.
Yeah, when you told me it was a backhoe with open ROPS, I was all, when that must have been an older machine too, based on the manufacturers. So yeah, there's so many different layers. I want to start by saying just like, I am so sorry for your loss, and those who are experiencing something similar to you, like my heart just goes out to you. But also to thank you, right, for telling your story and Justin's story. I didn't know your son, but now I know of your son, and for your courage to go out and share your testimony about him. His legacy lives on. And because you can't hold him, he's still there and he's still sharing his legacy. So just thank you so much for your courage and your vulnerability and your openness to talk about this.
Thank you. I just think it's so important, and I think, when these families share their stories, they don't realize that they're saving the life of someone they've never met. They could be saving the lives of people that they'll never, ever meet in their whole lifetime because someone took the time to listen to that story. I actually go out now, I go out on job sites, construction job sites, and talk directly to the workers and share his story. And this past May, I was on a job site in Boston, and after it was done, one of the construction workers was walking me back to my car, and it was fall stand down week. And he said to me, he said, "You know what?" He said, "I've been in this business for 20 years." And he said, "You're the first fall stand down presentation I actually listened to." And that's scary. That is scary. And, the thing I tell these workers is so important, especially the men and women that are on the front lines that are doing the work. They, a lot of times, working for big employers, the workers can get very complacent. Okay. Something happens to me, my family will be taken care of financially. I'm not going to worry about it. That is the furthest thing from the truth. Because what will happen, it didn't happen in my case, but listening to all of my family members' stories from across the country, this is the majority of what happens. The first thing that's going to happen is workers' comp's going to deny the claim. They're going to say it was the employee's fault that they died. That's the first thing that's going to happen. So right away, the family has no access to any funds for the funeral services. That falls on them financially. They have to bear that financial burden, and that's not right. The second piece of it is that, I have a life insurance policy through my employer. Yes, that's fine, but the policy is not going to pay out until there is a cause of death, which
Right.
again is
12 months later.
right, exactly. So right away, the family faces the financial burden of this, and the excuses that workers' comp uses. Like, I have a family in Ohio whose the husband was the sole source of income for the family, and he had a wife and 6 children, and he was killed in an automaker plant. The machine was not calibrated correctly, and he was crushed to death. Workers' comp denied the claim, saying he was taking medication for diabetes.
Of course, they're looking for a loophole somewhere.
Any type of loophole at all. And
And then they probably
so
stripped his insurance after.
right, and then the health insurance is stripped after for the wife and 6 children because there's no one paying the premium, so we're gonna strip you of the health insurance as well. I mean, this is what I stress to these workers is don't be complacent like that. Don't think that a safety rule is stupid, or, I don't need to wear my hard hat, or I don't need to wear what am I trying to say?
A
Hoist
lanyard.
in yes,
Yeah, it's a safety
halter,
lanyard.
or yeah.
Yep.
Things like that, and it just they don't realize how important it is that you need to come home, especially if you are the sole source of income, okay, for your family. You must come home every single day. I worked with my state senator, and I have a bill going through the Massachusetts State House right now on this particular subject, requiring workers' compensation to pay for all funeral and memorial expenses because they don't pay. What I was told immediately up front at the funeral home, you pay up front, and the funeral and the insurance company will reimburse you. Well, they reimburse you to a point. They won't pay. In my case, they wouldn't pay for the flowers. How do you have a funeral without flowers? Okay, so his dad and I had to incur that financial burden. So the bill I have going through the state house would require workers' comp to pay for the flowers, the headstone, the obituary, and the paper, raise the payout amount, because right now in Massachusetts, the payout amount is 8 times the worker's average weekly salary. They raise that to 10 times or $25,000, whichever's higher. So that's sitting with the Labor Workforce Development Committee. I testified on this bill back in June, so hopefully it's going to move forward. I'm hopeful.
And that's just obviously probably just a start on something that you can't put a price tag on. Like there's no amount of money that they can allocate to even, compensate for your loss. But to your point, it's like we can do something. We can do something more than what we've currently done or what we've done in the past. And you're like, we're just trying to inch our way to some progress rather than just saying stagnant and say, well, this is how we've always done it. Or we don't have the resources, or what other excuse they want to come up with as to why they can't do something, right? Yeah. I mean, there's so many layers to Justin's story and to many other stories. I talked about my career being over 2 decades in the industry. So I was on the equipment side, rental companies, but I have walked thousands of job sites from oil refineries to stadiums to high-rise buildings in Manhattan. I mean, we talk about countless stand up, stand downs. I mean, even like, when I was on a project in Manhattan, a tape measure falling off of, 40 floors down to the ground and watching what that small tape measure did to the concrete. Like if you were just standing there in your truck and something fell off, I mean, you're wrong place, wrong time. And what happens is they try to figure out, okay, well, whose fault was it? It's like, let's stop worrying about where the blame and everything is. But one of the things I want to ask you, because there's so many layers, right, was I look at it from the employer standpoint, where when I was at my previous employers, we had everyday safety huddles. We talked about near misses, right, in the line of fire, bottom, right, left, up, right, and we would walk these scissor lifts through our yards, and people would leave the control box on the side of the scissor lift, and they would drive, and then they would run over their foot. And we're like, no, I mean, it's a small instance, but no, you have to remove it. You have to basically get it 6 feet away. And we've had people, working for us for 20 years, to your point, complacency. I've done this, 2,000 times or 200,000 times. And a new employee is like, hey, we should be doing it this way. It's like how you approach each other. The young guy going to the old guy and saying, I have a better way. And the old guy looked at him and was like, hey, get out of here, kid. I know what I'm doing. But that boldness to stay like, no, I'm not doing it because I'm the new hall monitor that everyone runs away from when I come down the hall. It's, I care about you, and even to the point, if I'm being selfish, if you're not here, that's more work for me. So it's like, it's like you want to look at, it's like, how do you take ownership with the people, right? So they don't get complacent. What does the employers have to do? Say, hey, we have a zero tolerance here. If we see you without a hard hat, if we see you doing this stuff, yeah, I could be the big bad person, but guess what? You're suspended for the project. I'm helping you save yourself. And if you want to be complacent, there will be a monetary penalty for that, because I'm not going to allow you to come back to work tomorrow. And you're going to either like a parent would do to their child. Hey, you came home late. You don't get to drive your car. But again, that's just one piece of the layer and what you talked about too. And again, I want you to help us steer the advocacy of the group. And it seems to be like, what I've read, your life passion now is to get the word out. But we have, what can companies do from both the employer and the employee standpoint to say, hey, we're going to work together to make sure all of us go home, both sides. And then if we do run into a circumstance where we can't control it, like I'm going to use, 9/11, right? And the first responders, they know that, hey, when they go to work, something could happen. Your situation, no, I should be coming home. Or even like you said, an overdose. A parent's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to get that call, but I know based on how they're doing life choices, I might receive it. Your situation, you're like, I'm not expecting it. So you look at something like, okay, an unpreventable incident. Now it comes into, it's like, okay, how do we manage it? How do we inform the next of kin, the people that have to receive the phone call? What are the insurance steps? Do they understand like what to do? Because like you mentioned in your situation, my heart has been ripped out of my chest. I'm paralyzed because I wasn't expecting this. And now all of a sudden I'm just kind of like wandering and I'm like, what do I do? And I don't know where to go. Like there's so many different segments, and I'm just curious because you're in this space, like what would you tell to the employers? What would you tell to the employees? And then what is the key focus? You're saying, set it all aside. Let's work on this first and get this right. And then we can start addressing some of the other stuff.
Well, I think a lot of the issues that, in my 5 years of being with this organization and seeing, and hearing other family stories, And a lot of these fatalities happen with very small employers. And it's lack of safety training. It is basically what it comes down to. And, when you have a big employer with union workers, I feel I feel they're better trained. And I don't so much worry about those folks as I do the small businesses, because a couple of people that are on my board, mothers who have lost children to workplace fatalities, they were all small business. They worked for small businesses. And I think the small businesses don't take safety that seriously, unfortunately. Um, but I would say one of the first things they can do is to keep a very updated emergency contact list, okay? Because it took over 6 hours for them to find me as Justin's next of kin. And I think especially for a small employer, but any employer, that one of the first things, the most important things, you think it's a small little thing, but it's not. It's super important, and it saves the family a lot of stress, and and that they're notified right away if something happens to their loved one. But also, I just think that employers also need to not look at OSHA as the enemy. They're not the bad guy. They're the good guy. They're trying to keep you safe. And they have rules and they have standards put in place to do that, and to go around those to save money. You have to weigh that. Are you willing to put this employee in harm's way to save a few cents? And a lot of times these things turn out to be the smallest of things. We had an incident here in Boston back in about 5 or 6 years ago, where they were digging a trench in the road, and a dump truck was backing up and hit two employees, and they fell in the trench and they were killed. The reason that they didn't hear the dump truck was because the sensor that does the backup noise, it's a $25 part that was broken.
Or it's disconnected because they don't want to hear it. They're
They
like,
don't wanna hear it, and it's bothering the neighbors in the neighborhood, and I heard that it was broken. That was the information I was told. But these 2 workers were killed because of some $25 part, and these are the things that employers don't take into consideration, I think.
you're so spot on, because when I've sat on, safety panels and stuff, we've talked about near misses. We incentivized our employees to record near misses, right? To a point where people were just starting to put stuff in. But what I would say to employers is, like, educate your team on the importance of the why, right? And talk about it to where it's not scary. You're not going to lose your job because you've called something out, right? Or the location is not going to lose profit because now they have a negative score on you know, their company financial or whatever. So it's like, oh, we're going to take money away. But it's like, if we could just stop for a second and realize that it's not always about profits and saving the business, even though, there's a lot of people that rely on it. But getting laser focused on preventative maintenance. One of the stories I brought up is I used to run trucks, triple shift. We would deliver equipment in the middle of the night. We would go to different yards to pick stuff up because we had to drop it off, whether it's 4 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 9 o'clock at night. And drivers run out of hours. But one of the things is, I looked at it and I said, wait a second. I've got a driver going into a yard in the middle of the night, loading and driving equipment up and down on a trailer, chaining and binding. And he's by himself. Like, what happens if he just misses the step and falls, and his phone falls out of his pocket, and he broke the leg or something else, and now he's just laying there? And we couldn't get any help to him. And a simple kind of, hey, even if you checked in every 45 minutes, you got to hit the button. You got to tell somebody, I'm still good. I'm still moving around. But, when I was young, I was like, hey, we just got to get the iron. We got to move it. We were more worried about getting the task done than thinking about those things, until we brought in somebody that's experienced and said, hey, it's not about just getting the piece from A to B. Have you considered this? And then we brought in some of the drivers and we asked them, and they're like, well, I don't need any help. I can do it all by myself. And I was like, well, what happens if you slip, right? And you break something? Do you want to lay there in pain till someone arrives at 6 o'clock in the morning. You've been there since 1 o'clock in the morning. No one even knows. So I think there's things that we can, as employers or thought leaders, it's like, what are you doing in your organizations to think about proactive measures for those instances where you're in the line of fire and you might be by yourself, or this could happen, you know? Perfect example is like underground trench. I don't know why it still happens, but you see these videos and these stories about workers working in a trench with no shoring. None. And we're like, wait a second. We've known about this for 50 years. Like, why are you going in a trench? First of all, why did you jump in? Someone make you, force you, throw a shovel over the top of you and say, you better get in here. It's like, I can only speak for me. I would look at one of my guys. I'm like, no, I'm not going in there. Fire me.
And a lot of workers don't know that they have the option. That's one of the biggest things. Like, my son wouldn't have known. I mean, my son had told his girlfriend on a couple of occasions that he did not feel safe. He felt the house was shifting and creaking above his head. And, he said, this is hearsay, so I don't know if this actually happened. But she had said to me, she said, Rena, he told his boss that he didn't feel safe. And his boss said, well, that's the job, and walked away. And so he would not have known that he could have gone to OSHA, that he had a recourse. He just shut up because he needed the paycheck. And that's what people don't realize, is that you have a right to a safe work environment. Every single worker has that right. And if you not, and to be fired for speaking up about a safety issue, that's against the law. You cannot be retaliated against because you brought up a safety issue. You can even call OSHA to come in and do an inspection, and the employer cannot retaliate against you. And a lot of workers, especially young workers, don't know this. And that's when I go on these job sites and I see these young people, that's the one thing I hone in on, is that you cannot be fired for bringing up a safety issue to your supervisor. And if you bring up a safety issue to your supervisor and they do nothing, go to their supervisor, or go to your safety director. Every site should have a safety director anyway.
What have you seen as being kind of the biggest, best first step? Because you're saying that, a lot of the big companies, they already have this infrastructure in place. So at least they have it as part of it. If nothing else, it's a checkbox that, hey, you have to attend these classes, you have to do this. But what you were saying is that a lot of these smaller shops, this is something that kind of doesn't happen. So what are the most impactful big first steps that could potentially prevent injury, save lives, that you've seen?
I mean, I think more in-person training needs to be done. If I'm answering your question correctly, I don't know what innovations I've seen in terms of worker safety. I know there's new standards coming out from OSHA. Either it came out a heat standard or they're working on it. Our organization has an alliance with OSHA, so I get a lot of times to get firsthand knowledge of this before it gets released as to what's coming out. But unfortunately, worker safety right now it's not in a good place. And I think that, rolling back citation amounts and having what came out recently was OSHA's reverse policy on rolling back citation amounts by 15%. And also small businesses being made to self-report and self-regulate. That puts a lot of pressure on small businesses because they don't have the resources and the funds to conduct these major training, sessions. They just don't have the resources and they don't have the time. I mean, my son told me that he would have to, when he was given his paycheck, his physical paper paycheck at every Friday, he'd have to run to the bank to cash it because if he waited a few days, there might not be any money there. So this guy was like on the financial precipice anyway. And so I think a lot of these small businesses, they don't have anywhere to turn in terms of safety training. And it's really sad because, they're trying to make their way in the world. They're trying to, this is their livelihood. And now you have, federal agencies asking you to conduct your own training, and self-regulate when they just don't have the resources or the financial means to do so.
It's not up to the individual, but it kind of starts with the individual of like just spreading awareness of, hey, safety's a thing. If you don't feel comfortable, don't do it. If you don't feel comfortable, ask someone, is this the way it's supposed to be? Or like, just kind of have to watch out for yourself a little bit, it sounds like, because it doesn't sound like on, at least at a certain scale, when you're on the smaller side, that you might not have someone watching your back that may otherwise kind of assume that, oh, I'm working for a business. I'm covered. I'm good. That might not be the case.
Well, there's a lot of different ways to look at it, right? So I looked at it for like one, what used to fascinate me when I first started working for the rental company is, and I said this on another podcast, you could come into my store and I could give you a backhoe or a 60-foot man lift, and all you needed to show me was your credit card and your driver's license. And I'd be like, oh, you want it delivered? Okay, here. And a lot of times the way the contracts are written and stuff, they assume liability, they sign everything. But it's kind of like, okay, well, do you know how to turn it on? Do you know how to turn it off? Right? Do you know the function? We can't really actually train you on it. There's no training because then that forces liability. It's on the equipment operator to have the ANSI standards and or his employer to make sure that the operator has ANSI standards before you just hop in the unit and get it. Well, the other issue too is all those keys are universal. So you can basically just turn on a backhoe because you have a key or get up into a boom lift and operate it.
That's exactly my son's situation, was that the rental company dropped off the machine, handed him the keys, gave him a tutorial, and that was it. That was it. There was nothing else. And that's what the actual OSHA citation was on, was lack of training. And his employer was fined, I want to say, he fined originally $5,000, but then he appealed it and it got knocked down to $3,500.
Yeah, because the OSHA is probably looking at it from the incident and so we can only regulate the incident. They don't even correlate to was there a fatality, how much damage. It's just, nope, this is the code, this is the infraction, this is what we've assigned to it.
Right. And I remember the director saying to me, the OSHA director saying to me, please know this is not a reflection of the fact that there was a fatality. We can only cite the safety violation. That's it. And, I'm sorry, but, as a mother, not only that, how insulting that is, but then you turn around and you see during the pandemic, there was a tax office in one of the towns next to, close to me, where during the pandemic, they were fined $130,000 for violating a mask mandate. And my son gets killed, and his employer only has to pay $3,500. My head understands this because I know what the difference is between a willful and a serious, and I know that in my head, but you'll never be able to tell my heart that's right. No,
Scott,
not
did you bring up our conversation with Donald from yesterday at all, and his kind of a part of his story with, because one of the
that
things
was,
with companies that, for folks listening, and, we talked a moment ago about like the individual responsibility of just, trying to just look out for yourself. But even the small companies, it's just not worth the risk. Like, if you want to even take the humanity out of it and talk just business, which isn't fun to do, but we know that businesses do it all the time, where it's like, show me the numbers. And if they remove the human aspect, is, these incidents will and can cost you your business. And that's happened to one of our folks. He told his
one of our
story
guests
yesterday. There was an
yesterday.
incident, and it was, it closed him down.
Yeah, it was I'll tell the quick story. It was back many decades ago in the Superdome. They were renting tables and chairs for a Lions Club event inside the Superdome. And one of their drivers in rental company, this was tables and chairs, was in a pickup truck with a trailer, and he decided it was a good time to go open the seats and take a click it and smoke it. Well, a click it is like a tobacco, marijuana, cigarette laced in
Formaldehyde.
Something like
It was formaldehyde.
Formaldehyde,
Yeah,
like a
it's same.
PCP. And so then he proceeds to get back into the vehicle and do his job. Well, in that process, he's hallucinating. He runs over like 10 people on the job. And so as being the employer, it bankrupted them. They closed. They had to do everything because one of their employees decided to do that workplace incident. And it's one of those unfortunate things where you're just like, you can try to prevent so much, but people are just going to make decisions, in that case. But it's like, how do you handle it? I mean, he said that still lives with him today, 40 years later, about one of the victims of that, the rest of her life was different because one of his employees, chose to make a decision that it's just, and they were new, like, how do we handle this? What do we do? And, then you get attorneys and insurance and everything else. And at the end of the day, like JP mentioned in a different way, but it's still about the people. It's still about your loss. It's still about, the business is going to come and go. Unfortunately, your son, you'll never be able to, kiss him on the forehead or give him a hug anymore. And that's just tragic,
Mhm.
and,
Yeah, he was
there's no way to reconcile that.
he was talking about getting married, he was talking about having children, he was planning on taking his CDL because he wanted to drive the bigger machines and, do plowing and all of that, and it just was gone in an instant, it was just gone.
And my takeaway is I want to talk to people that have construction companies, businesses, rental companies. I mean, think about if like you're a young kid and you go and buy a backhoe and a dump truck and you say, "Hey, I'm going to go dig footings." Right? It's your first business. You don't know. You're just trying to make your payments and grow your business. And then hopefully you get a helper. And then you get another helper, and you're like, all of a sudden you went from 1 to 4, and you're like, "Hey, I'm actually starting to make some money." Think about when you started, even before you had your employees. If you don't do the right things, you don't make money. You don't come home. Your girlfriend, your wife, your kids don't see you. That ripple effect is like, if your employee doesn't show up tomorrow, let's say, for instance, it's not as catastrophe where you lose them, but they're hurt. They can't work. Guess what? You don't make money. Your negligence of being a leader to make sure they're safe just costs you time and money that you can't perform. So if you can step back and say it's not about just getting the job done and start layering, why are we doing this? Are we doing it the right way? What can we do to be most effective and most efficient safely? And stop worrying about if OSHA is going to come and see if I did something wrong. Like, oh, dad's going to basically come into my room and see what I've been hiding. Like, we're not here to punish you. We're here to protect you from yourself. So, and also embrace it. One of the past company I was with too, this is what I tell effective leaders is advocate for your safety professionals. Bring them into your world, not like, oh no, I have a safety audit coming, and stress out about everything. It's like they're not there to just check off and say, "Oh, you did that wrong. Oh, you're doing that wrong. Here's your sheet, and I just graded you on how bad you are." Like, come into it like with vulnerability and say, "Hey, I'm a mess. Please help me identify my blind spots so that we can all get better." Like, use them as a resource.
Right. All employers should feel that way, but unfortunately they don't. And there are some bad apples out there, and OSHA is very limited on what they can do. I mean, people think that they're this big federal agency and they can walk all over everybody and do whatever they want, but they can't. They have severe limitations on what they can do. And it's sad. They should have more leeway to do to do more things, to hire more investigators and to have more inspections.
What are the resources that these small businesses do have? I know that there's some costs if you have like in-person trainings and things of that nature. Those costs, but are there also free, I guess, self-guided options as well as limiting those as those might be. Like, I guess I'm just curious what's out there and what's available for those who may not have unlimited resources.
I mean, there's obviously podcasts like this. There's online training. That is I'm actually working with someone about that right now, because online training, because so when everybody went online in 2020, so did workplace safety training went online. And now you have AI that can potentially, you don't know if that person's actually taking that training or not. Okay, when they jump on the computer, they could have someone else logging in as themselves. They could just be sitting there and just clicking each box as it goes along, and then the certificates get spit out, and the employer's happy because they're in compliance. But is that person really truly trained on the material? So, online is a little, I hate to recommend online training to small businesses, but there are plenty of tutorials out there online, for safety. But I think the biggest thing that employers need to do, especially the small employers need to do, is communicate with their employees. Is communicate, 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 and leave those lines of communication open. Let the employee come to you and say, "Hey, I don't feel safe. Is there another way we can do this?" And don't, poo-poo them. Just, say, "What do you mean? Show me what you mean." There needs to be more lines of communication with these small employers with their employees.
Yeah. I mean, the good old the safety meetings, right? I mean, sometimes it's just as easy as that. Just say, hey, let's take 5, 10, 15 minutes. Make sure that we're all safe. Does everyone have their gear? Has anyone seen anything that you'd like to call out?
Right. Do you have any concerns? I mean, just ask that. Do you have any concerns on this site? That people may be overlooking, and somebody happens to have a sharp eye and say, "Hey, this looks a little rusty. Maybe we can replace this part." Anything like that. Small things like that will save lives.
Yeah, and going to the source, right? Like when we used to have those meetings, like it wasn't management sitting in and saying, "Hey, I've got all this information." Like have one of your techs, right? Or one of your laborers lead the meeting if they're, outgoing. Like they deal with it every day. It's like I'm in the office like hitting emails, like I'm just transferring information. I don't do this. And then what that does is allows you to, like, even in our personal lives, right? We thrive when we are in community, right? If I lived in Gloucester, like having dinner at your house on Sunday, like we develop a relationship. So I care about you and you care about me. And now all of a sudden we're watching out for each other. And I get it. It's hard. Some of these companies, like you move from one job to another job and you're not with them. And it's just a revolving door. But it's like, if we could stop and just get that community aspect where let's first all get along and then let's watch out for each other. But that leadership coming in, and we talk about on other podcasts, is for like an employer, it's the 3 R's. Like, how do you recruit? How do you retain? And then how do you recognize or reward? Like, if you don't have that structure when you start in a company, when you start to get outside of one person and two people, you want to go to 5 or more people, I would strongly suggest, how are you approaching those 3 R's before you start adding more?
Right. It's super important.
Yep.
Yep. It is. It's super important.
Absolutely. But yeah, Rena, there's so much to unpack here. And I mean, I think we could do 3 or 4 different podcasts on specifics, like how to manage insurance and how to,
Oh yeah, because
manage.
that's what we do. We help family members navigate through the workers' comp system. We help them navigate with OSHA because they have a ton of questions for OSHA. So yeah, and I hear these horrific stories of what happens to people across the country and the different ways that they die, and it's just horrific. How many there are, and the numbers are skewed. They're not, you can't really go by the statistics that OSHA puts out or the Board of Labor Statistics put out, because there's so many that go unreported and uninvestigated. And there's so much more, there's so many more deaths than what is being actually reported and investigated. Because I mean, one of my very strong board member, family members, her son was killed in a grain silo on a dairy farm in Wisconsin. That was never investigated by OSHA because there's a farming exemption in the OSHA Act that they're exempt from being investigated by the federal government, which she's trying to get rid of. But, it's just all of these things, this heartbreak that these families go through and the circumstances, surrounding their loved one's death is just, it's heartbreaking to hear.
Now, is your organization all volunteer based?
Yes, we are. We used to have one paid employee, that was Tanya Ford. And so when she got recruited by National OSHA to be their first national family liaison that they ever had. And I was vice president at the time and she was president. So when she left to go to OSHA, I was voted in as president. So I've been president for 3 years. But yeah, we're definitely national. We have family members all over the country that go out and speak, that will go out and speak and share their stories.
That's where I'm going because, I mean, you're one person, right? You only have so much bandwidth, but it's like, how do you get the message out so that you can develop a support network where if there's something in Seattle, Washington, or Phoenix, Arizona, or Denver, Colorado, like people in those areas says, hey, this is who you get a hold of. This is what we're going to do. Like you mentioned some of the bills and legislation that you've done in your state. Like, how do we domino affect that so that we have some consistency?
Right, exactly, and I would just say to reach out to me, if someone would like to have someone speak and share their story, or one of my family members to come and do another podcast with you and share their stories from another state. That's what we're willing to do, and it's super important to get these stories out so that people realize what is actually going on, and what can we do to these families also who have lost a loved one to a workplace fatality and don't know where to turn. That's what we're for. That's what we're here for. That was one of the biggest things is what we do is we support each other. And I have to say that, the organization is mostly made up of women. Okay, I'm going to say that. It's almost all women. And there's a reason for that. And I'm not man bashing here when I say
No,
this.
you're emotionally intelligent. We're knuckle draggers. We don't know what we're
Men don't
doing.
tend to talk about their grief. They
No,
hold
we
it in.
don't.
No.
We stuff
Women
it.
need to talk about their grief, believe me, okay? And so what we do is we have monthly table talks where anybody can jump on and we just, talk about whatever's going on. If someone could be going through and getting ready to do a deposition for their case, what have all you what has been your experience in a deposition, and we would let them know what our experience was. I'm getting ready for a workers' comp hearing or a settlement hearing, or a mediation. What's the process? How does that go? So we just kind of hop on and we talk to each other and lift each other up, and then I did divide it into a child loss group and a spouse loss group, because when you put everybody together, the moms that have lost children tend to dominate the conversation. So I said, we got to split this up. And so we do things like that. So mothers that get on, there's like 6 or 7 of us, and if someone's going through a hard time or someone's been triggered, we're like, you know what, you're not crazy. We totally understand, and it's super important to these people that they have someone who understands what they're going through, because it is a very unique situation. Where something that you do that's so mundane that you don't think twice about. You get up, you go to work, you come home, you eat supper, you go to bed, you get up and go to work, and over and over and over. And then when you don't come home, that's when the reality of it really hits. And so that's what we do is we support each other.
Yeah, and I'm sure, and I know it never goes away. It doesn't matter if it's 5 years, 8 years, or 18 years. There's those triggering events, whether it's an anniversary or it's a picture or a song or whatever. It just puts you right back in those moments. And when you don't have somewhere to go and you don't have a support mechanism, to know that there's resources out there like yours that say, hey, my situation is similar, not the same, but I hear you and I'm here for you. And this is how I attacked my grief, or that's how I manage my grief. And I'm here to just give you an opportunity to maybe learn and adopt some of the things that you do, right, to get through some of your tough days.
Right. And I don't compare my grief to anybody else's. Everybody is on their own journey. Everybody handles grief differently. And what I might find very triggering, somebody else might not find as triggering. So we just have to be very patient with each other and, let each other go through the journey that they're going on. And it's a lonely journey because it's just you. And other people may have known your loved one and say, I commiserate with you. I understand. I miss him too. And so, but it's so different when it directly affects your immediate family.
Well, JP, do you have anything? Because he's really good at the questions that keeps it going.
We covered a lot of really, really good ground, as, some of it being a little bit on the more, very serious side than what we may be accustomed to. But, certainly critical and important. So Yeah, I appreciate you being on. We've been chatting for about an hour here, I think. So,
Can I just leave you with a quick story?
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry if I
Okay.
missed that before.
Nope, that's okay. So our organization every April, like I said, April 28th is Worker Memorial Day, and every April we partner with a billboard company where we put up billboards commemorating Worker Memorial Day with a photo of your loved one. And so I put the post out on the family's support page to say, hey, it's billboard season. And what the families do is they pay $200 a billboard. They send in a photo of their loved one and the zip codes that they'd like to see the billboard in. And so the billboard company donates the space on these billboards. They create the design. They can be print or they can be digital. And they put them up all over the country. And so I hadn't done a billboard since I started with USMWF. I wasn't comfortable with it. I don't know why. But last year I started to work with the billboard company. And I said, you know what? I said, I think I might want to do a billboard this year. So I called my daughter because I don't do anything with him. And if I don't want to get her upset. And I'm like, what do you think? And she's like, you know what, Mom? I think that might be kind of cool. And so I picked out a photo of him. It's one of my favorite photos. He's wearing his Patriots jersey and holding a football. He was a huge Patriots fan, diehard Patriots fan. And I sent in the zip codes for my area. And so the beginning of April, the emails start coming in from the billboard company as to the locations as to where everybody's billboard is. And I get the one for Justin. And I look at it and they said they were sorry that they couldn't find a billboard in the available zip codes that I gave them. And they said, this is the closest location that we could find. And when I saw the location, I started laughing and I called up my daughter and I said, hey, Justice Billboard's up. And she goes, oh, good. Where is it? And I said, well, it's not where we wanted it to be. I said, and we have to drive a ways, but you're never going to believe where it is. She goes, why? Where is it? It's right across the street from Gillette Stadium.
Yeah, I was
Oh,
gonna
wow.
say that's got to be where it ended up.
Yep, and right across the street from Gillette Stadium, and there was like a 2-second beat where she didn't say anything, and then she goes, "Mom, you know this is him screwing with us, right?" She goes, "He's up there laughing his ass off because he knows we're gonna get our Patriot shirts on. We're gonna pile in the car. We're gonna drive all the way down to Gillette Stadium just to see his damn billboard." And we did. Of course we did.
That's great.
That is so classic. That's totally him winking at you going, hi, I
Yeah.
got you.
Yep, it is.
Now on those billboards really quick, is it just an image or do they give you a text spot? Like, is it digital? Like,
So they can be both. They can be digital or they can be print. And Justin's happened to be digital. So his image would come up for 10 seconds every minute. And there was 5 other advertisers. And there's a really nice, they do honoring and remembering our fallen workers, April 28th, Worker Memorial Day. Then it has our website. I can send you a picture of it if you'd like to see it. And then it said it has the loved one's image on it. And the families love it. I mean, they'll drive 3 hours to go see a billboard. They will. And it's very powerful to see your loved one's image up on a billboard like that. I mean, boom, I was like, when he first came up, I was just, oh my God, you know? But yeah, and they're very powerful.
and here's where I take it too, because I'm always thinking about like moving forward, right? Where it's like, I would love to see a picture. I mean, not obviously don't want to see anybody up there, but if I were to look at the picture and I'm thinking, Justin, I don't know Justin only through you. I would want to drive by, look at Justin and not just see the face, but I want to see something like, I wish I would have, or something where it's like, I can, whether it's about the incident or something like that, I want to be able to, let's just be able to see that person and resonate with something that I could take away with me, right? Not just seeing the face, but like, I wish I would have worn my safety harness, or I wish I would have spoke up, or I wish I would have done something. So now when someone's driving around, it's going, wow, I don't want to be that next person. Like, what can I do to not get my image on there? And right now that's a giving back effect. And I don't know about spacing. I'm just rambling right now, but it's a really good thing where now you get to honor your fallen. And I just look at it, it's like, how do we prevent someone else's picture from getting up there? Like, if we can do anything other than, I can't change my circumstance, but God, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that you don't have the same circumstance.
And if there's any other organizations that you both are affiliated with that you think that would benefit from me speaking or, attending a conference or something, just please let me know. Because that's what we're right now. We want to get the word out about our organization so that we can support even more families.
Yeah, we'll do. Definitely. I'm thinking of just a lot of occupational like safety companies. But to your point, like the speaking engagement, what you said early in the podcast, that your testimony when you went out and spoke, that individual's like, it never landed until now. Like I never let it in. It's almost like the Titanic movie. I never let it in until you told your story. I just thought, oh, okay, it was another incident.
Yep. Scott's got a good Rolodex too. And I'm sure we can make some positive connections.
Yeah, I'd love
And
that.
sharing it with big, large organizations to say, hey, I've got somebody that's got a story that you should channel this through your organization because you're multi-state.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm happy to do that. Yeah. I retired from my office job and I do this is all I do now is USMWF. So
In your previous, you were in what I believe was hospice or something.
yeah, I was a clinical recruiter for 20 years.
Okay.
I hired nurses.
So you've been in a
nurse
space with grief, and to even see that phone call, it's like you're like, no one can prepare for that. You're like,
Right.
I work in this space, and I'm not prepared.
Exactly. Right. My last employer was a hospice agency, and that's what I hired nurses for was hospice. So, but at the same time, they were very good to my daughter and myself because they knew what we were going through, and they did offer us grief counseling. They have a grief center, and we had grief counselors for a year at no cost to us. So they were very, very good to us.
I'm glad that you had that resource. That's huge to have that. Well, Rena, this was fantastic. Like I told you on the podcast when we first started, this one landed more with me. I wanted to really take time with this because it wasn't about business. It wasn't about profits and earnings, right? This is about people, and this is what really matters. So I'm just so humbled and blessed for you to take the time to speak with us and tell us your story and tell us about Justin and all the fantastic work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
you.
I really appreciate it, guys.
Well, everyone, that is a wrap for today's episode of Beyond the Build. We took away some real valuable lessons and insights, and I hope that you did as well.
If you enjoyed this episode, we would ask that you subscribe so you can never miss an update. If you're a thought leader looking to innovate in the construction industry, let's talk. We'd love to connect and hear your thoughts.
You can find Beyond the Build on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, plus anywhere else that you listen. And if you'd like to learn more about how Faro is changing logistics in the construction industry, please visit our website at faronow.com.
Once again, thanks for tuning in, and until next time, be humble, serve others, and make an impact.